It's Beas? Oh, darn it, I did it again.
Oops, I did it again
I'm
with
Beas.
your
That's
heart.
Beas.
We're the Blam Blam Truckers, and so are you, all you Blam Blam Truckers out there in Blam Blam Trucker land. We're glad you're joining us today here at the Blam Blam Trucker Podcast for a little Blam Blam Trucking. How you
One
doing,
day I
Beas?
will know my name, but that day is apparently not today. Ugh.
One day my prince will come. You all right?
Oh,
Ready to keep
yeah,
going? You ready to keep on trucking? Look,
yes,
even
I'm
when
ready.
things are getting you down, you gotta keep on trucking.
That sounds good.
You may be wondering why I'm singing. Well, I'll tell you why. Because I'm about to sing you something else entirely. Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman! Superman, yes, Superman, strange visitor from another planet with powers and abilities far beyond that of mortal man. Superman, yes, Superman, able to bend steel in his bare hands, uh, able to change the course of mighty rivers, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, a mild-mannered reporter with a great metropolitan newspaper, fights the never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way. I didn't start it off right. It starts with faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky. Anyway, we did that part.
Was that from the old Max Fleischer cartoons?
No, that's from the 50s black and
George
white
Reeves,
TV show with George Reeves.
where he could deflect bullets but has to duck a gun. I
That
understand.
that is one of the classic jokes from comedians for decades after. It's like, what is it with Superman where he stands there when they're shooting at him and the bullets bounce off, but when they throw the gun, he's got to duck out of the way.
Oh,
So yeah, um, Superman has been a part of American culture and the culture of the entire world since the 1930s. He's one of the S brand is one of the most recognized with inside of a little diamond shape. Um, is one of the most recognized symbols on Earth, if not the most recognized symbol. It's up there with Coca-Cola and Mickey Mouse's ears. Superman is an icon. Just around the world, everybody knows who he is. Everyone knows his story. And Bews has left the screen, and that's okay. And the thing about Superman is, if everybody knows who he is, why is he so hard to write? We have seen over the years, reading comic books, we've talked about when Jim Shooter rebuilt comics single-handedly with the help of many people when he rebuilt comic books in the 1980s during his reign. During his time at Marvel Comics from 78 to 87, we see the rise of comic books again. It's really the second golden age or the Shooter age of comics. So he actually got his writers a little bit of, and his creative teams, residuals. If they sold over 100,000 issues a month, they would start getting a piece of the action for every comic book sold. And DC was able to do what took Jim 6 months to get approval for and get passed, so people could actually start making money. He made Chris Claremont a millionaire. Um, what it took Jim Shooter 6 months to do, it took DC one meeting to do, because they only had to pay out on one comic book. Was it Superman? Able to bend steel in his bare hands? Able to change the course of mighty rivers? No, it was Batman. Superman was being outsold by Marvel's The Disco Dazzler. Disco Dazzler would have been getting residuals. Superman, the creative teams on Superman would not. Um, and it goes that way today. Superman can't break the top 100 best-selling comics since his son became Superman and went gay, and which is or bisexual or however you want to put it. It was a shock thing done by the writers to get the audience, and it succeeded for 1 month. And that's I'm not commenting on sexuality at all here. That's not the point. The point is the stories didn't improve, so the people they brought in for 1 month didn't stay. And that's been going on. Bad Superman stories have been going on for most of our lives. as I've been reading comics and watching TV shows. He's one of the harder characters to uh, make a TV show about. His movies have not consistently done well. Anything you want to add in here, Fuse? Okay,
No, I
I
I
have a
know
lot
that we
more to
will
say,
have.
but
I know we've talked about this before. There will be people who will disagree with the success of John Kent as Superman. I looked
yeah,
into it a little bit. It's not like a failure. It's he flux like some of his stories and stuff fluctuate up and down, up and down, up and down. But
yeah. He went back to his old record sales after what, a month, 2 months.
I
Um,
think it was a little bit more than that. But I'd have to
I
double check the
apologize.
numbers.
Not record sales. He went back to his old sales numbers, and it went up and down. It was they brought in a new audience with a gimmick, which is fine. It's a perfectly legitimate and often used technique in media. Um, so I'm not saying they shouldn't have used some gimmicks to get some more eyes on their product, but it didn't. The stories didn't keep the people there. And
Yeah.
you're selling attention when you're selling media, whether you're selling the attention of advertisers or you're selling people to pay attention to you. You're selling attention, and they weren't succeeding at that very well. Certainly not. None of their numbers would have allowed them to keep their book running in the Jim Shooter era over at Marvel, where you needed 60,000 issues sold a month, and we're not seeing that almost anywhere in comics today. So, but we want to talk specifically about Superman, and why is Superman so hard to write? What do you, any thoughts on that? Do you want to jump in on why you think it's hard to write or why it hasn't succeeded?
Well, I'm going to say one of the things that I have always had issues with reading. Now, I started reading comics with the reign of the Superman,
Okay. That was a
for the
good
most part.
storyline, by the way. Highly
Yes.
recommended. I have the graphic novel
So,
here somewhere.
my brother and I mentioned actually even in the last episode, my brother bought comics. Uh, we started with Reign of the Supermen. He went back and bought the Death of Superman and Funeral for a Friend graphic novels because they had already come out by that. Pretty much by the time Reign of Superman started, they did the collections to catch you up for the most part, which is great because they
Oh
don't
yeah,
always do that. Um, but
they
so
usually wait a year.
we bought those. Uh, my brother still even has an unopened comic with the black armband that they put in there with the. Yeah, so I started with that, and that was cool. And I continued reading even a bit after that because Superman, like, he was kind of re-getting used to his, like, not re-getting used to his powers, but there was good stories and stuff in there. But then when it went back to Superman being back, I read a little less, and then it got to the red and blue Superman and the energy ones, and it just
That
one of
was
my
very
biggest problem.
creative. It
It
wasn't very
just
successful, but it was very creative.
one of my biggest issues with Superman, and one reason I think it might be hard to write is because for me personally, and I know that this is not the case for everyone, so you truckers out there who disagree with me, that is perfectly fine.
Do it in the comments. We'd love to see it.
Yes, we'd like to see comments in general. Please. It improves our engagement. I think Superman is just, he's so powerful that it's hard to come up with reasonable stuff that should be able to beat him. My favorite Superman stuff revolves around Clark Kent. I will be bluntly honest. Because Clark Kent, even Clark Kent, who was dating Lois and she knew who he was, Clark Kent is vulnerable and everything, but Superman isn't as much. We're talking about fights. I mean, you always have to find a way to depower Superman or underpower him or overpower his opponent. You know, Parasite's good because he can steal Superman's powers. You know, uh, the other Kryptonians we see, okay, they're on equal levels with him. Uh, Magic users because Superman can be affected by magic. Lex Luthor because at least he can outsmart Superman and half the time has kryptonite available. Like, you have to find a way to like depower him or make him weaker. Otherwise than that, it's like an episode of Dragon Ball Z where my power level's 9,000, where yours is only 8,000. And then Superman powers up, and then it's like, well, I've been training, and now I'm at 10,000. Well, my friend here has 20,000. Um, like, I'm joking, but
He's saying
that.
that, and he's somebody who loves Dragon Ball Z.
Oh yeah, love it. Oh, and as of day of recording,
Rest in
Akira
peace.
Toriyama, Akira Toriyama. But but yeah, like that's one of my biggest problems. I have a similar problem with other heroes as well. I have that problem a lot of times with Thor. Um,
Hmm.
I have problems with certain versions of Hulk.
And yet Thor and Hulk are sold consistently well throughout the 80s and 90s.
But the human side to them, I think, for me, is one of the reasons why I like them. But when we're talking about just reading a standard Avengers comic, meh.
Hmm.
If we're reading a Hulk comic or a Thor comic, we get to
Especially
see
when
the
Larry,
more human side of them.
especially when Peter David was writing the Hulk.
But yeah,
So I think that's part of it. You have to find there's only three kinds of conflict in story. Three: man versus man, man versus nature, and man versus himself. Superman lends himself to all three stories, but they focus mostly because it's an action, especially in movies. I'm going to be bringing this more towards the movies now. Um, Superman focuses a lot on man versus man, outside physical threats from other sentient beings, because you can't just say man versus man when we're talking about a Kryptonian to begin with. Man versus man, he might be fighting somebody from Apocalypse. He might be fighting Mongul, who's uh I forget
War
what
World.
planet he's from originally, but he took over
Oh,
War World. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, man versus man is hard to do for Superman because so few people can match him. The writer at that, or the creator, whoever it is, filmmaker, needs to be smart about how the threat is presented. If you go back and watch Lois and Clark,
Which I
um,
am right now.
excellent, fun series. A
Hmm.
lot of the problem Superman had wasn't in defeating the bad guy; it was finding the bad guy, who, well, it's not always easy to do, even with super hearing and X-ray vision. You can't always just know where the guy is and go get him. Um,
Can always find Lois though.
well, he's always listening for Lois. He knows what she sounds like. Um, yeah, so often it's finding the bad guy. Most of the villains of the week he could easily defeat in Lois and Clark, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That keeps up his power level for the readers. You still see he's still Superman. Whatever the challenges he was dealing with wasn't a challenge to his powers, which is one way to do the writing. You also see, if you watch the TV show Leverage, which I highly recommend, at least the original series. I haven't watched all of the, the continuation series there, so I can't recommend it or not recommend it yet. The judgment's still out. Call's still out. There's a character in that called Elliot, and Elliot is the hitter for the team, and he's supposed to be, all the members of the team are the best in the world at what they do, and he's one of the greatest martial artists in the world, or most effective anyway, and he almost never loses a fight in the entire show. But the thing about Leverage is, just because you can beat the bad guy's hired muscle doesn't mean you can beat the bad guy. And that's something they should be keeping in mind for this, for when writing Superman, is the make more enemies that act more like Lex Luthor, that have something on Superman to stop him from being able to just use his powers straight out. Put him up against challenges here where he's equal to other men, like Lex Luthor does, famously. Uh, One of the great Lois and Clark ongoing villains is Tempest, who's a time traveler, and who knows that Lois and Clark are who they are, and uses that to his advantage at different points during the series. So yeah, it's the stories aren't that hard to write for man versus man challenges, but that's not really where the focus in Superman needs to be. And so the next option is man versus nature. And some of those stories are going to be great stories. When Superman is trying to save people from a typhoon or a hurricane or an earthquake or whatever it is, or even a villain, if you go back to Man versus Man, who knows Superman's in somewhere across the world saving people from a hurricane and can't fly back to Metropolis, so now it's the time to rob the banks. Now it's the time to enact their dastardly plan because Superman isn't here to stop him. Which, again, we're going back to Man versus Man. But Man versus Nature stories, you're not going to make a movie about that because it could be a factor in the movie, but it's not going to be the main part of the movie because if you watch the Superman Returns, when he fought an island of kryptonite, it wasn't that interesting of a film. It's not a great villain for a movie.
I've not really watched that movie since I saw it in the theater.
Neither have I. Brandon, again, we're not knocking the actors. Brandon Routh does
No,
a great job.
Brendan Routh was a
Yeah,
fantastic Superman. He
yeah.
did as an actor, he did the job well.
Prove that in the Arrowverse.
Unfortunately, because Superman Returns was his more breakout movie role, that's what relegated him to TV.
Hmm. Then, well, he had a few follow-up movies that didn't do so well either. But that's
Yeah.
the life of being an actor. The last one we deal with is man versus himself, and that's really where Superman shines. Um, by its very nature, a Superman story is a reflection of ourselves. It is a story about you and me. What would we do if we had those powers? That's the question that the writer should be asking. That's the question that the readers are going to be asking. The viewers are going to be at. The audience is going to be asking because it's escapism. So we put ourselves in the position of the hero. If we were that guy, what would we do? If I had those powers for a day, what would I do? If I had those powers for the rest of my life, what would I do with them? And those questions need to be answered. And they're going to be asked by the audience, so you ought to have some answers ready as to why Superman is doing what he does. And I think one of the biggest problems we hit when talking about why Superman stories don't hit with the audience is this is going to get a little bit into morality here, which is something we don't always cover. But it is very easy for a good person to write a morally good person to write about morally bad people. It is very hard for people who are not morally good to write about morally good people. Something I've noticed in life, and that was not the best way to put it. It was not succinct or quick. So I'm going to have to explain it a little bit, and maybe a quicker phrase will come to me or probably Beas. He's quite quick in his own way. That's You're quite quick in a lot of ways, actually, not in your own way. That wasn't an insult. That was a compliment. Well, it may not have come out that way, but it was meant as a compliment.
All good.
Sorry, buddy. So everybody experiences temptation. We all do. I do. You do. We all do. We all know what it feels like to want to do something that we know is bad for us, whether it's having an order of French fries while we're on a diet, or because French fries taste great. If they didn't taste great, they wouldn't be so popular. Not only are they fried potatoes, they're cut in the French style first, hence the name. But they don't have to be French fries. They can be crinkle cut fries. They could be tater tots. When you're on a diet, you kind of want to stay away from that many carbs and that small of a serving. And the friedness isn't helping, and the fat and the salt. Actually, salt probably won't affect your diet all that much. It'll just help you retain water. But I'm getting off subject here. That's a mild temptation we have all felt. What about the temptation to grab something out of a store that you can't afford to pay for, or you don't want to pay for it? Or the store did you dirty and you feel like getting a little revenge on them by taking something. Whether you're a small child who's engaging in shoplifting for the first time and kind of knows better, but maybe they don't, and it's time for you to learn a lesson. Okay, we've all thought of it at least once. even if it's just a pack of gum or some Reese's Pieces. Or I swear they made a mistake naming it Reese's Pieces because you're gonna want to mispronounce one of them, but they're still delicious. Anyway, that's a small temptation. That's a bigger temptation than eating French fries, but then there's larger temptations like punching someone in the face who's just said something that offends you. We've all wanted to punch somebody in the face. Do we do it? No, there's consequences to those actions. Just because you're going to feel good for about a second doesn't mean they're not going to come back and punch you in the face, and that's going to feel bad. Or they're going to report you for assault to the cops and press charges, and now you're going to jail for punching someone in the face after they insulted you. There are consequences to our actions. There's more than there's reasons why we don't do this. But people who choose to be good, like Superman, who see the virtue in doing the who see virtue for what it is. It is not an abstract concept. Oh, well, he does good because just because it's the right thing. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I hate that expression. It's an accurate expression, but it is a pet peeve of mine. You don't do the right, it's a very true expression. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But why? Why is it the right thing to do? Superman knows this, and if a writer doesn't know this, they can't write Superman. And I'll tell you why it's the right thing to do. Because the right thing to do is helping somebody else when they need help. Even if it costs you a little bit, helping them when they need help. Saving someone else's life, even if it means putting your own life on the line. That's the right thing to do. That's what heroes do. These aren't just people who resist the temptation to eat French fries. These are people who choose not only to resist temptation, but to do the right thing when it's called upon them, even when it costs them. That's a hero. That's Superman. And if you don't live that lifestyle, if you've never not only made that decision once, but 1,000 times, you don't know how to write somebody who makes those decisions all the time. You don't know how to write somebody who doesn't count the cost when it means doing right by someone else. And again, doing right by somebody else could be climbing a tree when you're scared of heights to help get a kid out of a tree who's up there scared to death of heights. So you're a little scared yourself, but you know that kid needs to come down and no one else is around to help him, you go help. Doing the right thing means stopping when somebody's got a flat tire on the side of the road and helping them out, even though you have other things you want to do with your day. Doing the right thing means pushing somebody else out of the way of a speeding vehicle even though you might get hit. And that's Superman level helping out. And except for Superman, it wouldn't just be a car. It would probably be like a meteorite. He throws himself in the way of an asteroid that's going to destroy the Earth, which was a Lois and Clark storyline. Spoilers from a 30-year-old show. 40, 30, whatever it is. 90s, early 90s, mid 90s.
Old enough to make me feel old.
Old enough to make you feel old while you watch it, and you're like, why didn't he just use his cell phone? Why didn't he look it up on Google? Google hadn't been invented yet.
I just like watching the old cars from the 80s and early 90s.
Oh, yeah. Did you see the episode yet where Lois can't figure out email? Where the information, they made about 15 information superhighway jokes all in one episode?
Not yet.
Oh, it's awful. You'll love it. It's so bad. I feel like, what's that old joke? I feel like roadkill on the information superhighway. So yeah, we're approaching 25 minutes here. That's my opinion on why you can't get a great Superman story, and why one of the reasons why the Zack Snyder Superman didn't resonate with fans as much as other Supermen did. They did okay at the box office, but Superman isn't sitting there wondering why he has to help people. Superman knows why he has to help people, because they need help and he can provide it. And it's not going to cost him much to help. But most of the time, like some of the great Lois and Clark stories are when it does, it costs him his relationship with Lois time and again, when he has to go out and save people and he's having a hard time coming up with explanations without her discovering that he's Superman at the beginning of their relationship. Eventually they get married and now she's covering for him and she's a whole lot better at it than he is. Superman doesn't and Lois and Clark is a good series to watch to get a feel for this because Superman does the right thing, even when it's going to cost him. There's an episode where he's playing a poker game and he's tempted to use his X-ray vision to cheat, and this is in
I
season
saw that
one.
one.
Yeah, and
And like Jimmy makes a comment. Superman would be perfect at poker because he could just look through. And Clark goes to do it, and then Perry's like, "Yeah, but he wouldn't do that.
because
You,
he's
you
super.
can't say something like that. He's Superman. He would never cheat." And Clark's like,
And what was on the line there was his paycheck, like
"Mm-hmm.
whether or not he'd be eating well that week, or whether or not he'd have a hard time paying the rent. Superman in a poker game. That was a good storyline. Just a quick little snippet and a larger story, I'll grant you, but Superman being challenged on his morality and having to make the right decision because the wrong decision, people get hurt. And
And
sometimes he has to choose between. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, not to change characters, but it's legitimately the person who I also like, the Marvel character who realistically has those thoughts probably more often than anyone else is Spider-Man.
Spider Man does whatever a Spider Man can.
Because Spider-Man has seen the results of not doing the right thing
With
when
great
it
power
wouldn't
comes
have
great
cost him.
responsibility.
Because you didn't do the right thing when it was easy to do, bad things bad things happened.
Yeah.
They won't always happen, but they can. And doing the right thing,
Helping people, stopping bad guys. You're
yep,
helping people from getting hurt. It's not the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Virtue is its own reward. All true statements. All very true statements, but it's not explaining anything. You're not helping anyone learn anything when you say that, which is why it got scoffed off so much in the 90s, excuse me, and the 2000s.
what, Spider-Man?
No, when people
Oh,
would say things like you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, or virtue is its own reward. People have been scoffing at that for the last 40 years.
yeah.
It's not that it's not true. It is true, but it is recursive. It relies on its own definition. Virtue, the 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 line "virtue is its own reward" was the end of an argument, and it's the one that really stands out. But if you don't know the beginning of the argument, just coming to the conclusionary statement without going through how if you help people, they do better and you do better. That what might cost you a little bit in the short term is going to be worth a whole lot more in the long term. That a life of making the right decision is going to be better for you than a life of making the short term, quick, it feels good now decision. I think our society in a lot of ways has lost focus on that, even though all of us know it to be true just through experience. Doesn't mean we're always doing the right thing, but yeah,
Well, I'm gonna say we should probably call it for this episode.
I agree. Anybody out there who knows somebody over at DC? I happen to know a lot about superheroes and telling good morality tales and how to write good superheroes like Superman. So if you know somebody over at DC, Warner Brothers, David Zaslav himself, maybe, um, have them give us an email or uh, notify us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. We should probably start doing stuff on Instagram. Um, we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get the opportunity to pitch a movie for you guys. And that's my plug. I limited it to two of our four episodes we recorded tonight, per request of our editor in chief, supreme editor in chief. You want to take us out, or shall I?
I like being the editor-in-chief. With great power comes great editing ability. See you, truckers.
That's not true.